Okay, this is part two on the Cooper's Ferry find in North American site dating to 16,000 BC. The article I was reading at the very bottom of the page when you go to it, which is just right below that, actually says addendum, it's adding to it, and then there was a correction. And man, it goes on. And so I'm going to go ahead and present that to you too. Over 10 years of excavations, the Cooper's Ferry team uncovered dozens of stone spear points and blades and multi-purpose tools called bifaces, as well as hundreds of pieces of debris from their manufacture. Although the site is near the Salmon River, most of the ancient bones belong to mammals, including extinct horses. The team also found a hearth and pits dug by the site's ancient residents. That's where they got some of the carbon dates, containing stone artifacts and animal bones. Radiocarbon dates on the charcoal in the bone are as old as 15,500 years. In North America, few tree ring records can precisely calibrate such an early radiocarbon date, but a state-of-the-art probabilistic model placed in the start of the occupation at between 16,560 years and 15,280 years. Now he says, I may not think that it goes back to 16,000 years, but I surely can't believe it goes back 15,000 years, says Michael Waters, an archaeologist at Texas A&M University in College Station. And I don't know what the big difference is unless you're trying to punch that idea that it couldn't be 17. Oh, and no way. Well, what if they came back with a carbon date now and they said, no, 22 to 23, 24, 22 to 24, or would you go, well, I believe in 22, but I ain't going to go 24, so you're just going to do that with any date or something? Makes you wonder about things like that, but and I know they have the methods they supposedly go through, but it actually, whenever they just have a blend statement like that, it just makes you think, okay, well, they had one dating here a little closer to 15, a little to 16, and then a spread as much as from over 15 to 16. And he goes, well, I'll go with 15. And it's okay, I guess, to go with the lowest amount of dating. But here it mentions what I talked about like the Galt site. It says the only rival to Cooper's Ferry is the oldest site in North America, and it is the Galt site in Texas. Researchers dated that site about 16,000 years ago by optical luminescence, and I believe there are pieces there that went back to 18,000, but it also has a wide band on its method. Um, that in fact they say a method with larger error bars than radiocarbon dating, which already is not finite, but it gives us a good ballpark and so on. It's easy to see how seafaring people might have reached Cooper's Ferry, says Lauren Davis, an archaeologist at Oregon State University in Corvallis who led the excavations. Isn't that funny? Because until very recently, you couldn't get anybody to make that statement without feeling like they're putting their job on the line. Just on simple boating. If you were to say boating at 3,000 years after the Indians got going, they still weren't willing to go with that for a long time. And now they're going with a hypothesis where there are people here before the Clovis and there's people here before there was the Clovis Gap we're talking about. Well, then they were in boats. Okay, cool. Although the site is more than 500 kilometers from the coast, the Salmon, Snake, and Columbia rivers link it directly to the sea. She's saying as the people came down the coast, the first left-hand turn to get south of the ice comes up the Columbia River Basin. Davis says it's the first off-ramp. The area is now federal land, but was long occupied by the Nez Perce tribe. Here's one of those bifacial blades that's shown that really almost looks like a leaf, thicker down the ridge in the middle and stuff. It's a 6-centimeter blade. It's among the oldest of the Idaho site, but not the oldest out of the groups. But they say it was occupied by the Nez Perce tribes or the Niempu. They know Cooper's Ferry at Nepe, an ancient village founded by a young couple after the flood after a flood destroyed their previous home, says Nakia Williamson, the tribe's director of cultural resources. Our stories already tell us how long we've been here. This study only reaffirms that. No, and I'd probably guess that this wouldn't be the Nez Perce. This would be somebody that went way the hell over east or something eventually, but they're seeing them here at this time. But, whatever. They want to have that narrative still and try to attach it to them. He hopes the excavation in which Nez Perce archaeologists and interns participated will help others recognize the deep ties the Nez Perce have to their ancestral lands. Well, yeah, ancestral lands, that's fantastic. We're developing that now too as Caucasians here in our ancestral lands that we're starting to develop here. This is not just something that happened 16,000 years ago, he says. It's something that is still important to us today. Well, yeah, I agree with that. And Indian heritage is definitely important. And seeing the peopling of the Americas and how it all played out, because these aren't somebody that's really you can just point at over in Asia and say, yes, see, there's some Indians too. And so that's how they came over. So it was a one-time event across from a people that normally doesn't cross and we don't even see on this side. It has to do with X chromosomes and X haplogroup. Cooper's Ferry may also offer a glimpse of the tools carried by the first arrivals to the Americas. Many of the spear points found there belong to the western stemmed point tradition, which are actually smaller, about the size of a pinky, and lighter than the hefty Clovis points, which aren't near as big as Solutrean points can get. Such tools have been found in early sites from British Columbia to Peru, and as far inland as Texas, like the Galt site. Similar points are known from Japan from about 16,000 to 13,000 years ago, Davis says. And that will make a connection for you of other videos that I just did recently. For whenever I put out the one on Kennewick Man, they tried to connect him to ancient Ainu people that used to run all of Japan and back in elder days, and they said clearly that they're a Caucasian people that contain these spear point type things. Now we see that those similar points to that, where else are those similar points? Oh, off of Japan. The Japanese people are surely not the Amerindians. So how does that work out? Well, the Ainu were a Caucasoid people that had entered into there, and then going up north, they ran into some Inuit Eskimoid people and mixed before and after in the Americas. But not all, because it all wasn't one wave and one group and that was it, like somebody would like to have everybody believe. He and others argue that western stemmed points are emerging as the best markers of the first people to arrive in the Americas, totally cutting off the Solutrean hypothesis and acting like it doesn't exist, putting their fingers in their ears and going, I don't hear you, I don't hear you. And that they carried their tradition with them from Asia. Yet they don't find exactly this western point technology so much in Asia. But Metzger isn't convinced that the Western stem tradition conclusively predates Clovis or represents a coastal connection around the Pacific Rim. He says there are plenty of sites in Siberia and in Russia without that technology. And the complete points at Cooper's Ferry are almost the same age as Clovis. No, it's not. In fact, it's drastically redating it. You tried to say 1,000 and then gave a stretch that was over 2, but the site's oldest tools are blades, bifaces, and fragments of points, and fashioned with the same methods used to make Western stem points, as he said earlier. Just as archaeology puts one debate about the stone tools in the Americas to rest, it could be gearing up for the next one. And then, we're gearing up for the next one, and the next one is Solutreans, after the fact that this had gotten debunked too. And then there's ones that go in between them and when we think of Leif Erikson and stuff, and in between Columbus also, that we can eventually get to sometime. Here it shows the correction. It says correction of 29 August at 3:15 p.m. So apparently it was only a couple of hours after I gave the first part of it, and I just got this, so that's great. An earlier version of this story misstated that Michael Waters excavated at the Galt site in Texas. He excavated at the nearby Deborah L. Friedkin site. Oh, that's the other site that I talk about in that in a couple of other videos. But Galt's the one that's most famous. But now, hold on. Because you said that he did up there and dated it to 16,000, are you saying that also the Deborah Friedkin site dates for the same dating too and shows another corroboration of something that dates many thousands of years before pre-Clovis even? Is that what we're getting? It sure seems like it. But they only want to fudge it at you slowly and let this generation go through. And when is the generation they're going to start telling this? And then they're going to let that float through and then eventually start talking about the other topics. As opposed to just the idea of going ahead and getting it out in the open and going with it. But then everybody needs to be well aware. It doesn't need to be some hidden story they put on the back page of anything. Why would they? Why should they? I know there's a lot of people that aren't interested in history so much. Why live in the past? Well, it's just everything that happened. You don't know what's going to happen coming up, but you sure as hell can look back if you do it right. It's an interesting story. It's the only reason that we're all here. It's the only reason that the person who's listening to me now is here. It's from what had happened before. So it's interesting to kind of find out something about it. Anyhow, guys, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And I guess I'm glad I got to... I wish I could have put this in one part, but I'm glad I got to make it into a two-part and put it directly back to each other as I'm going to put it out before I even put the first one out. And so it makes it more complete rather than putting out something and then having to correct it just days after. Appreciate y'all, and peace. We'll go on to the next video.